Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile 2 discussion. Today, we are 69 hours away from the major livestream announcement. Now, that's at the time I'm recording this video. By the time you're watching it, it'll be even less than that. That's going to be where your major questions about early access are going to be answered. How much is it going to cost to get into early access? What's going to be available in the way of endgame? All sorts of things like that. But one of the things that is easy to miss when Grinding Gear Games are making big announcements like that, a lot of small stuff gets completely buried. Purposes of today's video is going to be to look at one of those little announcements that would otherwise go completely buried. That is today's teaser. This is about some unique items that are ice themed that are going to be making it into Path of Exile 2. I also have a second topic that I want to discuss, and that is the topic of unauthorized leaks. However, I want to be clear about this. It's going to sound like there's been a major leak from what I've just said there. I'm not going to pull any of that clickbait rubbish on you. Best of my knowledge, there have been no major unauthorized leaks of Path of Exile 2. The reason we want to discuss them is to discuss why that is such good news. Because as much as many of us would like to have a whole bunch of information, the fact that both Grinding Gear Games staff are confident enough in the product that they don't want to undermine it through leaks, and also the fact that the alpha testers for Path of Exile 2 have not really been leaking in any significant ways. Why that's such good news, we'll get to that in a sec, but let's start by talking about these new unique items. So, Grinding Gear Games have put out a couple of little teasers related to unique items. These are mostly about what they're going to look like in Path of Exile 2. We don't have their stats, although there's a little bit we can speculate upon them from the mechanical identities in Path of Exile 1. But it is important to note that this was announced as the world will perish in ice. Now, these items in Path of Exile 1 are not all ice themed. We have Veil of the Night, which has a very loose lightning theme and is an absolutely terrible item. We have Nocturnal Caress, which is just an early game, maybe speed themed item more than anything else. We have Frost Breath, which is cold themed, and we have Ice Tomb, which is also a cold themed item. Let's start by looking at Veil of the Night, which is an homage to Diablo 1. In Diablo 1, there was a unique item called Gotdamarung, and this item was terrible once you identified it. However, it was something that you could equip unidentified, something you can't do in Path of Exile. And if you did that, all of the explicit modifiers on it didn't apply. If you did equip it unidentified, it had a tremendous 60 armor, which in Diablo 1 was phenomenal, and all of the other modifiers that were drawbacks in order to make such a powerful piece of armor work, all of those did not apply. Veil of the Night, on the other hand, keeps to the theme of giving you a whole bunch of global defenses. 18 to 22% increased global defenses is the equivalent of having 18 to 22% increased armor, increased evasion rating, increased energy shield allocated on the passive tree, but on top of that, it also works for ward. So far, so good. This item sounds like it's really good until you read that line, elemental resistances are 0. In short, damage that you take from elemental sources, at least at endgame, is quadrupled, and this is completely and utterly unsurvivable. This item is completely unusable as a result, and it is basically a meme. One of the most prevalent Veldo maps that you might have seen if you've ever opened those things in any numbers is one that is a complete meme that is designed to highlight this item. It's a void Veldo map that has some truly heinous mods on it, and that awards a foil Veil of the Night as a joke. This item is definitely not something anyone wants to equip in PoE 1. However, it's worth noting that the only elemental theme to it is lightning damage, and in Path of Exile 2, maybe it's being reflavored to be something that's about cold instead. There's a lot of ways that this could be done. It could still be a dumpster tier unique, but maybe they've decided to give it a chance to, well, you'd say shine, but given that it reduces your light radius, maybe not shine, maybe sit dull on top of someone's head. Nocturnal Caress is next, and this is an item that has become a popular leveling unique. Ever since it was overhauled quite some time ago, it has a couple of important mechanics on it. Firstly, it's got a bunch of attack speed, which is really good for a lot of movement skills. Then it's got cast speed, which may or may not be useful to your character. Reduce maximum mana, which is annoying, but it's not as bad as anything that reduces your maximum mana by reserving it. All it's doing is just reducing the amount of mana you have left after all your reservations have applied. And so, whilst it's a nuisance, it's not particularly bad. Then we have the things that combine to be a bit of a unique selling point here. 10 to 15% chance to grant a charge at random when you kill a monster, and Conduit. Conduit is something that only applies if you're playing in a party, and it means that anytime you gain charges, so do all of your nearby minions. And by minions, I mean other players in this case. They all gain the same charges as you. If If you gain a couple of endurance charges, so do your friends. If you gain power charges, so do your friends. If you gain frenzy charges, then you don't gain the ability to leave them in the dust because they gain that extra speed as well. That's Noctonia Caress. It's something that has no cold theme at the moment. So let's see if that changes with Path of Exile 2, because otherwise it would feel a little bit strange for it to be part of this ice-themed unique items reveal. Frost Breath is next, and in PoE 1, this is unambiguously an item that is cold-themed. This has the text, attacks with this weapon deal double damage to chilled enemies. It's not particularly popular or powerful on its own, but where it does have a little bit of a chance to shine is in conjunction with added cold damage support or other sources of flat added cold damage that are not coming from your weapon. What these will allow you to do is take full advantage of that attacks with this weapon deal double damage to chilled enemies stat, and then boost up your damage even further as a result. And that's Frost Breath. It's a pretty simple item, but it's something that could be powerful. It's just that it's been left a little bit in the dust by the arguably more powerful Replica version, Replica Frost Breath, which is the same thing with chaos damage as this does with cold, but also has the text, your chaos damage is capable of chilling. And finally we have Ice Tomb. Ice Tomb is the one of these that I'm probably most excited about. Ice Tomb is an item that you would happily equip at level 39 in Path of Exile 1, except for one very big problem with it. And that is that chances are when it drops, it's not 4-linked. And you're more concerned about having a 4-link on your character than you are about the fairly useful explicit mods on this item, at least at that level. You've got a chunk of strength, a chunk of intelligence, and a massive gob of cold resistance on this, plus some good local defenses. You can't be chilled. There's a lot to like about Ice Tomb, but there's not enough to like about it to warrant manually 4-linking an Ice Tomb that drops for you while you're leveling. And if you're at endgame, there are just flat out better choices than Ice Tomb as well. So it's not like people are interested in wearing a 5 or 6 link one at endgame, but a 4-link one is something you'd happily use early. And the problem is that the resources it would take to make an Ice Tomb into a 4-link could instead be used to trade for another player to get something that's just better than a 4-linked Ice Tomb. What's going to change in Path of Exile 2 is that gem links are no longer going to be something that is attached to the item that you socket the gem into. Instead, it's going to be something that's tied to the gem itself. Gems will typically drop as a 3-link, then you'll be able to get a Jeweler's Orb to upgrade it to a 4-link, a different Jeweler's Orb to upgrade it to a 5-link, and a different Jeweler's Orb again to upgrade it to a 6-link. What this means is that there's not going to be this requirement that every time you want to upgrade your chess piece, you then need to start with something that's already linked. And that means that if Ice Tomb is anything remotely similar to what it is in Path of Exile 1, then it's going to be a much more enticing item to equip in Path of Exile 2 than it is in Path of Exile 1. Additionally, that's just Ice Tomb. There are going to be a whole bunch of unique items in this same situation in Path of Exile 2. Every single unique chess piece in Path of Exile 1 that you look at and say, I kind of like this, it's reasonably good, but it's not worth investing into it enough to make it a 6-link, all of those items end up being something that in Path of Exile 2 will actually see use. Even if it's just for a little while, even if it's just as a leveling item, they will end up being something that you're willing to use. Okay, so that's the topic of the new unique items grinding your games is spoiled. Let's talk quickly about the question of unauthorized leaks. As I see it, there are two main places that unauthorized leaks can come from. The first one is from playtesters, the second one is from company staff. During editing, I realized there's a third category as well, and that is various third parties that are doing translation services or other sorts of services related to the game that aren't actually GGG employees themselves. Those people, though, are a bit of a different animal because they're more likely to get sued if there is a leak than the other group. The fact that there's been no leaks from company staff is a really good sign. Generally speaking, most people in game design, not everyone, but most people in game design have quite a degree of passion for the products they create. And what this means is that when there's a product they're working on that they think is rubbish, but they're being pushed into working on it in a certain way by corporate within the company or anything along those sorts of lines, you tend to see a number of leaks around it. Probably the best known example of this from the last couple of years would be from Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons & Dragons during the period where they were planning to change a whole bunch of legal agreements related to the open gaming license. Anyways, you don't need to know the whole story of a now 21-month-old hobby drama incident that came up. A whole bunch of Wizards of the Coast staff that were passionate about the product of Dungeons & Dragons itself, but that were very, very upset with these changes, ended up apparently leaking a lot of information about this to the gaming press. Gaming Press then ended up bringing it to the attention of lots of players, and this ended up in a huge uptick in interest for Wizards of the Coast's biggest competitor, which is actually the TTRPG that I've been a fan of for a while, Pathfinder 2nd Edition, that ended up resulting in a whole bunch of new players to that game that pretty much were churning over from D&D. So there you got an example where there's corporate decisions that are being made within the company, and game designers are leaking against that in order to undermine the management there. There's been none of that in Path of Exile 2 so far. The second source of leaks that's significant is the ones that come from alpha testers themselves. A lot of people are aware of the concept of a non-disclosure agreement. Non-disclosure agreement is simply a promise that you're making that's legally binding, that you're not going to reveal information about a particular test. Ultimately, there's limits into how effectively a non-disclosure agreement can be enforced. If someone's fairly well off, then Grinding Gear Games could conceivably sue someone that maliciously breaks the NDA. But if someone's not, then there's not much point in doing that. And all that they can really do to enforce a non-disclosure agreement is ban them from Path of Exile 1, Path of Exile 2, and any further games Grinding Gear Games put out. Well, the thing is that if you think Path of Exile 2 is a complete pile of dumpster fire garbage, then in that situation, you're not going to be that fussed about the prospect of being banned from it. And you're probably also not that fussed about being banned from Path of Exile 1 either, because there's plenty of people, Path of Exile 1, they've either tried it, decided it's not for them, or they've just completely burnt out on it over time. So with that in mind, I think it's really, really promising that we're not seeing a whole bunch of people whose approach to Path of Exile 2 is to say, you know what, this game is such a dumpster fire that I don't care about being banned from it, I just want the notoriety of being the one to leak it. This, I think, is some really good news about Path of Exile 2. It's definitely going to be the case that it's still not going to be for everyone, but what I think this means is that it's more likely that people who are sitting on the fence about whether they like what they've heard about Path of Exile 2 so far, many of those people will find that they fall on the side of liking it more than they were expecting. Otherwise, we would be seeing more leaks. We'd be seeing some of the things that happened within Wizards of the Coast, where staff were leaking about it if they thought it was rubbish. We'd be seeing alpha testers leaking about it, and we'd probably be seeing leaks from other places as well. We're not seeing that. That makes me more confident. That's the final word. That's the reason I wanted to talk about leaks today. I'm going to leave it there. May your Varlobs have interesting results, and I'll see you in a little bit under 69 hours when we get to the GGG live event, which I will be rebroadcasting over on Twitch with my live commentary at the time.